Welcome to Living Legacy Leadership, where we explore, discover, and share insights, tools, and strategies for a life well lived into elderhood. I'm your host, Donna Kim Brand, author, speaker, legacy strategy coach, and creator of the concept Living Legacy, where you choose to live life on your own terms while contributing to people, places, and projects along your life journey. I believe that the life you live is the legacy you leave. Now, the guests I bring to you each week all address some unique aspect of learning, leadership, or legacy. This helps you raise your own game as a leader in business and life, and also showcases some extraordinary people who exemplify living legacy leadership. At least once a month, I also offer a training session to skill you in game changer thinking for your own application. So get your notebook ready or sharpen up your memory by tuning in your attention, and we'll dive right in. Well, you will be thrilled to know today we have landed a coup by being able to invite Larry Watson to our show today. Now, Larry and his latest book, The Lives of Edie Pritchard, are being featured at the Miami Book Fair this year. But Larry comes with lots of history and lots of work behind him. He was raised in Bismarck, North Dakota, the author of at least 10 critically acclaimed books, including the best-selling Montana 1948. His fiction has been published internationally and has received numerous prizes and awards. His essays and book reviews have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Sun-Times, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and other periodicals. He and his wife live in Kenosha, Wisconsin now. A film adaptation of Watson's novel Let Him Go is currently in production with Kevin Costner and Diane Lane and due to release in 2020. Now, today we'll primarily be exploring his most recent book, as I mentioned, featured in Miami Book Fair, The Lives of Edie Pritchard. So welcome, Larry. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for the invitation.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Now, before we get on to The Lives of Edie Pritchard, I gotta ask you, you've got a movie in production. Is that due out soon? And what's that like?
Well, I'll tell you right away, it's very exciting. And it is not only in production, but it's ready to go. And Focus Features plans to have it in general release on November 6th. And here's a little sneak preview. My wife and I have seen the film, and we think it's just terrific. And I'm not just saying that because we happen to be in the fancy restaurant scene.
Oh, you do? So we'll be on the lookout for you. Fantastic. So rubbing elbows with, film royalty. What was that like, and how did they include you as the author?
Well, we visited the set in Calgary, and we were only there for a couple of days. Mostly we just got to hang out, and it was great fun to watch the filming. I mean, it's a process that's always fascinated me, and to be right where it's being made was a great experience. And I kept trying to make contrast between what it's like to write the story and then what it's like to film the story. And as for meeting people, I was just, people couldn't have been nicer. They couldn't have been more welcoming. They couldn't have been more forthcoming with their willingness to talk about their craft. It was just a great experience to be there.
That's fantastic. And, I know a lot of writers have some, they have things in their mind, even though when we read, of course, we read words on the page and we get pictures in our mind as the reader. How about you as the writer, and then how the characters were depicted? Did they even look, let alone sound and feel like the characters you had in mind when you wrote the book?
Well, that's a really interesting question. When I'm writing a novel, I can keep it in my head during the process of writing, but once I finish it, it begins to go away very quickly. So when it came to viewing the film, it was like a completely different experience for me, and maybe that's the best way to approach it. You're right. I work with words, and they work primarily with images. There certainly are some differences between my novel and the the finished film. But you know what? The screenwriter and director Tom Bazooka had his own vision, and the movie is true to that vision. And I think its spirit is very close to what I hoped for when I was writing the novel.
That's really cool. So have you been stimulated to either approach your next book with an eye to snagging a movie out of it, or has it changed how you approach your craft in any way?
It hasn't. I'd certainly be willing to entertain any offers. Now it sounds like I'm shopping it around already or something. I really have no sense of how that transition from book to movie happens. I've had other novels that there has been interest from movies, but this is the first one that's actually gotten made. And I just think, how do you do it? You just get lucky. Tom Bazooka called me years ago and asked me if the rights were available, and we had a really good conversation, and then it happened.
That's cool. That's wonderful. Well, and they like to work with people that are easy to work with as well. And it sounds like you were able to keep a distance, so to speak, from your, what you'd completed as a novel, to not have it be so precious that they could get on with their artistic license and create a marvelous work. So we're excited to see it. So that you said November 6th, 2020. The movie is called Let Him Go, featuring Kevin Costner and Diane Lane. Pretty cool. All right. Well, we want to chat today about the lives of Edie Pritchard. You game?
I'm ready.
Okay. I am just newly introduced to your work, and it's interesting what people, the comments and the reviews you've had. For instance, in regard to this book, one of the reviewers, Huffington Post, actually said a suspenseful and evocative novel with stunning prose, painting strongly drawn characters facing daunting emotional, social, and family conflicts. So with that introduction, can you give us a sense of the plot of the story of The Lives of Edie Pritchard?
Sure, I'll try. It's a little more difficult with this novel than others because it's in three parts. So we look at Edie Pritchard in 1967, in 1987, and then in 2007. So we see her at different stages in her life. But those different segments don't cover a great span of time. So one of the things that I thought would be my task in writing this novel would be to try to suggest the whole of her life, but using really very brief episodes. So in each of those three sections, there is a road trip. And during those road trips, there are various crises and conversations. And I'm hoping that readers get a good sense of who Edie Pritchard is and what she has struggled with in her life from those three sections.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, part of the premise, of course, is that she's a physically stunning woman, very attractive, very alluring. And, one of the things that tips us off in the beginning is even in her high school yearbook, the photographer who, was ogling her in a sense, said, pretend to look like you know something that nobody else knows. It's like he saw her as wiser than her years. And that speaks a lot about what she goes through, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And that knowing part of her is something that's always in her character, but it's frequently overlooked. I mean, I don't want to say that beautiful people have a difficult time in this world, but sometimes it can be hard to be recognized for who you are because people see your looks and especially when you're in a small town, that's who you are. That's your identity. Oh, Edie, she's the pretty girl. She's the pretty woman.
Yeah. Or the dumb blonde you can, kind of.
Yeah. Sure, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I loved, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then it's easy for women, particularly in that era, to be defined too by relationships. Oh, Edie, she's Dean Linderman's wife, isn't she? Oh, sure, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you actually sum it up in a couple of statements where it's mentioned you never have a chance to be someone other than who you were then, especially in a small town. There's that kind of mentality of stamping an identity on you, despite the fact that a lot of people evolve over time, especially if you go away from a place, and you don't see that evolution. But you also said all of us are someone else in the eyes of others.
And sometimes we can know a little bit about who we are in the eyes of others, but not always. And I think sometimes people perhaps want to keep from us who we are in their eyes, or they want us to be somebody, whether our personalities or our lives conform to that or not.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And, you asked the question, who has the right to control the memories of us and others? Isn't that interesting? Is it who we were in that high school yearbook picture, the roles we had that people remembered us by until we updated that data at a reunion, perhaps? And so Edie, like you say, had her role defined very much through the relationships that she went through. So the characters that you have in the story, in the small town, takes place in the Northwest. So there's a pretty much rough and tumble atmosphere about the characters themselves, along with the geography. So given that you're from Bismarck, North Dakota, is that a big part? Are you a man's man in terms of your writing, primarily? Would you call yourself that?
No, I wouldn't call myself that. I'm not sure I know what I'd call myself, but I do know what type of thing you're talking about, a certain stereotypical male. And even if I don't feel as though I conform to that, I know what the type is, and I certainly grew up around men who are like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the relationship between Dean and his brother is a very interesting dynamic in the whole story. Chat a little bit about that so people are clued into paying attention to that relationship.
Sure. When I started the novel, I thought that it was going to be a story that featured the twins, Dean and Roy Linderman, about twin brothers, both of them in love with the same woman. And although that remained in the novel, it's not primarily about the brothers. It's about Edie. I mean, she just was such a compelling, interesting character, and with such depth to her that she just sort of came to the front of the stage, so to speak. The brothers sort of compete for her. She is, in the opening section, she's married to Dean Linderman, but Dean oddly has somehow lost interest in her. And I think it has something to do with his relationship with his brother, who is a womanizer and who has been pursuing Edie for years, whether she's married to his brother or not. And so you have some strange things happening with their roles. They compete. They remain on good terms. All of them do. Edie, at some point, feels as though to save her marriage, she needs to get her husband away from his twin brother, who casts a shadow over both of them.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
She doesn't succeed.